Good morning. It's great to have you with us on Air Talk. I'm Larry Mantle. It's been 23 years since I did a segment focused on the Church of Scientology. Back at that time, I interviewed in 1988 the former head of the Riverside Church, Bent Corridon, who wrote a book called L.Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman. I had two representatives of the L.A. Church of Scientology, Shirley Young and Tom Paquette, who came in and took part in that conversation, and it was a wild one indeed. I was hoping we could recreate that with representatives of the Church of Scientology to come in and talk about this segment we're doing on the church today. They've declined, but have provided several pages of response to the book that Janet Reitman, journalist, has written titled Inside Scientology, the story of America's most secretive religion. Janet Reitman wrote a Rolling Stone piece, cover story Inside Scientology, which was a finalist for a National Magazine Award back in 2007, and then has now turned this into a full-length book after researching it in the intervening years. Janet, good to have you with us today on Air Talk.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's get you just a little closer to the microphone there.
Okay.
So let's talk about first of all about who you interviewed for this book. The church has said that you didn't talk to people inside the church, active leadership there. That was just people who were mad at the church that you focused on.
That's completely false. So I interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed hundreds of people for the book. And I've been interviewing people since 2005, including some of the top church officials of the time. So, I'm not actually going to get into a whole defense of my reporting because I don't feel it needs to be defended in any regard whatsoever. And these are just ridiculous allegations, and the church can go back and check its own records. They have tapes of me interviewing their officials.
Okay, but they say none of those happened post-publication of the magazine article.
The magazine article, they don't understand how a magazine article is done. A magazine article, first of all, most magazine articles become books. I mean, most books that are based on magazine articles, they incorporate the reporting. I began planning to write a book while I was writing the magazine article. Midway through the magazine article, I realized I was writing a huge article that I was going to turn into a book. Period. End of story.
So then the interviews that you conducted, how many folks within the church did you speak with active Scientologists?
I am really not going to get into this with you. I have interviewed probably 20 officials of the Church of Scientology, including some of its top officials.
And are they people that you can name that you spoke
Mike
with?
Rinder, Tommy Davis, Ben Shaw, Pat Harney, the current spokesman of the Church of Scientology in Clearwater, Florida. The church is upset that I didn't give them a call in the past 2 years. And there are reasons for that, and those reasons have to do with the protection of the sources that I interviewed, who were very fearful of their anonymity, and they were very fearful. Most of the sources in my book spoke on the record, and they were very fearful that they did speak on the record.
So, in many,
I was not going to endanger them by opening up this whole dialogue. And frankly, I spent such extensive time with the Church of Scientology in 2006 that there is nothing, I was not going to get any new information from them. They were the same people. I interviewed them already. Tommy Davis was the head of was the spokesman of the Church of Scientology until just, I don't know when, very recently. I spent 3 days with the guy. Mike Rinder was the former spokesman of the Church of Scientology. I've interviewed him before and since.
Well, let's
Pat Harney is continuing to be the spokesman of the Church of Scientology in Florida. There's nothing, and you don't understand the basics of Scientology and the way the Church of Scientology operates, but there's one of the problems with the Church of Scientology, if you will allow me to tell you, is that they are a very static organization. That's one of the problems that they're facing. This is why, in my view and many other views, they're losing certain members. They have been, because they are not an organization that reforms and that allows for discourse and that allows for reporters to come in and have nice chats with them, that allows their top leader to be interviewed. David Miscavige has not been interviewed by anyone since 1998, to my knowledge, not by any reporter since 1998. Okay, and I want to finish this. And so because they do not allow that, they have a line, a very specific line, and they will tell you what the line is, and that line doesn't change. I was given every possible answer to every question, even the stickiest of questions. And there was no answer I was given in at the time that I would not be given exactly in the same way again today.
Okay. Janet, I'm not trying to be antagonistic to you this morning. I'm just trying to ask you about your book and the methodology of writing it. So I kind of don't understand why you're upset with me. But
because of the tone of the question. It's like, I mean, there's the methodology is right there. It's very evident in the book. This is an incredibly well-researched book. It has 45 pages of notes.
Okay, but the church has had a response, so I feel like it's my obligation to ask you about the church's response. Right. So let's talk about the people outside the church that you interviewed, because we've seen a tremendous rise in disaffected former church members who have used the internet as a way of organizing, of telling stories about their experiences, and speaking to the outside world about Scientology. How big an effect, in your view, has that online movement been on the church?
I think it's been very significant. I think it's been extremely significant. And the online movement in general has been significant, and it's been going on for a long time. It actually started in the 90s. But the most recent online movement, which began with the Anonymous group, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, that began in the mid-2000s. And that, in my view, has really what it did was it emboldened a lot of former members and officials who very quietly had left the church, including a lot of people that I had interviewed previously for my book, to be more public. And so these protests that began to be held throughout LA and then elsewhere in the country, and the sort of message boards that began to spring up, and just the rise of blogging and the rise of really sophisticated sites, not just like these weird little bulletin boards that nobody knew how to post on, but like really interesting sites. That growth and the anonymity that you could do it with, and it enabled people to get involved, to find a community, and then to ultimately go public, which is what happened with a lot of people and some of the most outspoken critics of Scientology. Now, when I interviewed these people, they were in the closet, in the back of the closet. Very, very fearful, very, very had no interest in suing the church, nothing like that. It's been a phenomenon, and I think it's been empowering, if you like to use that word, and it's been good, I think, for them.
We're talking with the author of Inside Scientology, the story of America's most secretive religion, Janet Reitman, with us on Air Talk. I'd love to hear from you as an Air Talk listener, any questions you have for her about her investigative journalism she's done on Scientology. Maybe you're a former member or current member of the church, or you just have questions about Scientology and, according to Janet Reitman's book, how the church operates. We're at 866-893-KPCC or the Air Talk page, kpcc.org, 866-893-5722. If you're like me and have been in Los Angeles for a very long time, you've seen the dramatic growth of L.Ron Hubbard's church. In the 1970s, when I was going to school in Hollywood, you couldn't help but be inundated with Scientology and the personality testing that was going on, the celebrity center that had been created. It was part and parcel of Hollywood, where the church continues to have a huge influence as a major real estate holder. They have refurbished a number of historic buildings, put a lot of money into their real estate plan. So any questions, any comments you have about Scientology, love to hear from you. 866-893-5722. So, Janet, let's talk about the Los Angeles roots of the church, because it has such a huge presence here on so many different levels, including the International Center right near Hemet.
Yes, that's the international base. That is the nerve center of the Church of Scientology, and it's a former resort that they bought and turned into a compound, a very secure compound for the church leader David Miscavige and all of the top officials of the church and the staff that serve them. And it's the management headquarters. It's also where they produce their films, and they call it their dissemination headquarters. They produce all of their the products that they have a recording studio, they have a film studio, they press CDs there, they do everything there.
And so that is the nerve center essentially for Scientology around the world. But how spread in Southern California are some of the other leadership parts of the church?
They have the giant blue base, which is called the Pacific Area Command Base on Sunset. It's that big blue compound that you see the former
old Cedars of Lebanon Hospital.
Exactly. And they have the Celebrity Center. which is that old beautiful mansion on Franklin. They have a number of buildings on Hollywood Boulevard, and they have little missions spread out throughout the city, throughout the LA area. I mean, they have. I don't actually have an exact number of them, but there are many of them all over the area.
And is the church largely based here from the research you did, just because of Hubbard's role in Hollywood and in Los Angeles? Is that what led it here, or is there more to it than that?
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. I think that to some degree, yes. I mean, Hubbard was here. He liked it here. Although, I have to remind people that he began Dianetics and Scientology. Dianetics began in New Jersey. He was living in New Jersey, and it was published in the New York area, and his original Dianetics center was in New Jersey. Scientology was created he was in Wichita, Kansas, and then he went out to Phoenix, and it was in Phoenix. So, but the Church of Scientology itself was incorporated in California initially, and I think that it found a root in California because of Southern California. California has always been a home for new religious movements and for
self-help movements.
Yeah, exactly.
Psychology embraced here, all kinds of different things to help people lead better lives. And it seems that one of the things I think you point out in the book is that throughout different generations of American development and embracing different movements, Scientology has been able to lead with things that connect to those societal interests.
Absolutely. One of the things that I found most interesting about Scientology and why I think it's relevant is that it has been extremely shrewd over the years at attaching itself to whatever the sort of cultural obsession of the time is. So it attached itself to pop psychology, it attached itself to the New Age movement, it attached itself to the sort of spirit of rebellion of the 1960s, to the self-help movement, to the recovery movement, even to the rise of professional development and business management courses that were really popular in the 80s and the 90s to help, people get ahead. I mean, it attached itself directly to that. It's having a hard time figuring out what to attach itself to today, actually, which is, I think, a problem for it. But, it's attached itself in certain ways to education reform, drug reform policy, it has a prison reform agenda, and it is very good at sort of subverting the fact that it is Scientology and just presenting itself as something much more innocuous.
What I'm curious about, having actually back in the 70s read part of Dianetics, I didn't get all the way through it because I found it a very difficult read. But anyway, I did read part of it, and it struck me as very much a lot of the sort of basic psychological principles and bringing up things from within, and a lot of stuff that you sort of an amalgam of things that you would read in a lot of sort of similar books. And so I'm wondering how did it go from something that would just be, well, here's some ideas L.Ron Hubbard has about how to improve your life, into an actual religion with its own theology?
Well, I think L.Ron Hubbard, shrewdly turned it into a religion with its own theology, knowing that it would have to have a theology in order to be classified as a religion. What happened with Dianetics was that part of, the central aspect of Dianetics and Scientology is this counseling called auditing, which is about essentially getting in touch with your inner, the traumatic moments of your life and getting over it through this, process. And they have a complex, a scientific name for those traumatic moments are called engrams. You have an engram that you need to clear away from your reactive mind, which is the sort of this Freudian subconscious, sort of. So people were doing this auditing and going back and back. You're supposed to go back in time to relive these traumas, and people began to relive things that happened in previous lives, apparently. And L.Ron Hubbard immediately seized on this and said, this is spiritual. And what we're doing is religion. And so that then was the sort of the beginning of an evolution that turned into this, all this quote unquote research that he did into the history of man and the roots of of humanity and the roots of the world.
And multiple IRS battles later, it
right.
got the official sanction as religion. We're talking with journalist Janet Reitman, author of Inside Scientology, The Story of America's Most Secretive Religion. Again, we invited a representative of the Church of Scientology, given its huge presence here in greater Los Angeles, to join us. They declined but did issue a statement. It's posted on our website if you would like to see that. Call us now at 866-893-KPCC or comment on the Air Talk page at kpcc.org. Now, Hetty has. We're talking again, Janet Reitman, author of Inside Scientology. She's going to be signing copies of the book tonight at Book Soup on the Sunset Strip, West Hollywood at 7 o'clock. That's tonight. Tomorrow night in Los Feliz at Skylight Books. That's at 7:30 p.m. And then Sunday morning at 11, the Center for Inquiry in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. Again, 866-893-KPCC or the Air Talk page, kpcc.org. Alex, in Los Feliz, you're on Air Talk.
Yeah, hi. My question for the guest is, why should I feel more threatened by Scientology than, say, other religions? The Christians and the Muslims are blowing everybody up, and the Catholics are raping all our children. Why should I be more fearful of Scientology?
I don't think you should be fearful of them, and my book is certainly not a book to whip up anyone's fears. I actually think that Scientology used to be an organization that was very good at making people afraid. They did a lot of infiltration of government agencies, and they would harass critics mercilessly. And very aggressively. And today, unless you are a critic of the church, unless you are doing them harm in some way or another, I think you have zero to fear from them. But they are, a group that has tremendous staying power in our culture, no matter what. And they have certain ideas that we may not all agree with.
Appreciate your call, Alex. Thanks very much. One of the big differences in the picture of Scientology is between what the church says. It says it's continuing to grow. Its international presence is beefing up considerably, and that the church has been throughout its history growing by leaps and bounds. Critics on the outside say that there's been so much damage done to the church and its ability to attract members because of all the internet information as well as journalistic pieces like the St. Petersburg paper in your book. Is there a way of getting at objective numbers about Scientology membership?
It's impossible. It is impossible to get a specific number. The church maintains and has consistently maintained for many, many years that they are you'll see numbers that range between 8 million and 11 million members worldwide, which, is just an impossibility by every account. And yet, some critics will say, oh, there's 10,000 members. I think a reasonable number would be about 250,000 people who are Scientologists worldwide, of varying degrees of commitment. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when the church talks about their membership, they include anyone who has ever bought a book or anyone who has ever done one single Scientology course or something. So that could be a huge number of people because Scientology was huge for a while in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, in the 70s,
yeah.
I bought the Dianetics at the Scientology Center, and I took an introductory course.
You're on their roll. You're a member.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I didn't realize.
And so am I. I bought their little introductory package too when I began my Rolling Stone story. So
I didn't realize. I mean, what's interesting for me, just because I was curious about Scientology because I've been so exposed to it in Hollywood, so I took the personality test, and the person who looked at it and said, clearly you've got some things in your life that you're unhappy with. You can, so take this introductory course for just $5 at the time. And I said, sure. And so I happen to have my car actually, there in Hollywood. They said, no, we'll take you to where you take the class and I'll come with us. And I said, no, I'll drive. No, please come with it. So I went in the car with a woman who said that she was married to one of the local leaders there, took me down to a place where the class was. And in the class, the lecturer was up explaining about some of the principles of Scientology, just very, very basic introduction. And I started very respectfully just asking some questions about it. And the people, and the room was full of people, I don't know where they came from, but started kind of murmuring like, oh, God, sort of like not shouting me down, but discouraging me from asking questions. And I thought, well, where did these folks come from? Did they, just materialize on site? And why is it not okay to be respectfully asking questions about the religion? And that was my personal encounter with trying to learn more about Scientology.
There you have your answer to the journalistic. You have had your tiny moment of journalistic frustration.
Well, I wasn't a journalist. I was a college student at the time. This went back to 1977 or 78, I think. Anyway, let's take more listener calls. 866-893-KPCC. Let's talk with Stephanie in Hollywood. You're on Air Talk.
Hi. I was recalling the article from Time magazine in 1991. It talked extensively about the IRS and its investigations of Scientology. And also, I think that now I heard that they lost their ability to claim that they're a religious organization for tax reasons. And I wanted to learn more about that, about the IRS and their investigations, if you know anything.
Yeah, well, the IRS, first of all, Scientology is a tax-exempt organization. There was a very long battle to get that exemption, which they did get in 1993. And part of the tactics that the church used to ultimately win that battle were lawsuits. There was a tremendous amount of litigation against individual IRS agents against the IRS. By individual Scientologists against the IRS, and then Scientology as a whole against the IRS. There were hundreds of lawsuits. And there were allegedly investigations of individual agents, as well as, a lot of pressure was put upon the IRS. This agreement was a secret agreement. It's very unusual, really unprecedented, and they got $1 billion tax exemption at the end of it. And there are a lot of questions about exactly how they got that and what exactly was the button that was pushed, because the IRS was actually winning its war against Scientology. These were two entities that were at war, and they'd been at war for a long time. Scientology had been seeking exemption for years, since the 60s. So, there's a lot of questions about how the IRS really won the war. How Scientology really won the war. And it's a very, very closely kept secret. IRS people are still, I've interviewed people who are still very afraid of talking about Scientology, even off the record. So we can, make up our own minds about that. But that's the basics. There's more in my book.
Joel in Culver City, you're on Air Talk.
Yeah, hi. My question is, you talked about it earlier a little bit, the disaffected members. What are they fearful of? What type of intimidation are they subjected to? I mean, are they like physical, lawsuits, kidnapping? I mean, that's always been curiosity of mine.
Well, a lot. I mean, I know several disaffected members who are, report they're being followed around by private investigators wherever they go. They have people following them, including to where their children go to school, where they drop their children off at nursery school or daycare. They're afraid of lawsuits. And other forms of harassment. It's in the past. I mean, there's a really long history that Scientology has of harassing its critics through lawsuits, bankrupting people, through threats, various types of dirty tricks, quote unquote dirty tricks. But the people, that I know of today. It's this idea that they're constantly being followed and watched, which can, I think that can kind of drive you crazy if that's really happening to you all the time.
Were they able to provide to you, Janet, photographic or other proof of that following? Or?
There are some critics, well-known critics, as one of them is a couple of former officials. One of them is in Texas, a guy named Marty Rathbun, who, he videos them. He keeps a very careful document of this. And I know of other people who just are living elsewhere and who are, reporting daily encounters with PIs. But there are definitely, some of these disaffected members have begun to take photographs of the people photographing them.
Now, there have been a number of the former church members who've said that there was physical abuse. People were overworked, that they were treated very poorly within the church. Does any of this rise to the level where they feel there should be criminal charges, or just they felt like the church didn't treat them well?
Oh, if the thing with the physical abuse is that there is no way to prove this physical abuse because most of this took place on the international base, which is a secure compound. And no one within the base would ever go out to the police or a hospital or anything like that. So there's no way to document that anybody had a rib broken or whatever. That said, every single person I have talked to who have reported these incidents to me completely independently of one another, and often just in terms of just discussing what happened on the base in very sort of spontaneous ways. So I really, there's no doubt in my mind that this did happen. Feel that they were physically assaulted. I mean, in certain ways they were definitely assaulted.
So what kept them from? I mean, ultimately, people are responsible, right? Unless they are actually locked in or kept from being able to leave. Responsible for leaving a situation where they're being harassed.
Yeah,
right?
But this is a psychological situation. I mean, you're talking about people who are, first of all, these people are the management of the church. They are the people that most dedicated cadre within the church, even within the C organization, the management, which is already the most dedicated cadre within the church. These are the most dedicated, the diehards.
Essentially the ministerial staff?
Oh, yeah. These are but beyond that, they're the people that they serve, they're the servants of the church. It's like a monastery in a way. And they're also, in many cases, they grew up in this church. This is the only thing they know. They don't, to explain Scientology would take a very long time, but in a very basic way, these people they don't understand what we understand. They don't understand heaven and hell. They don't pray. There isn't a real God in the way that we look at God. They have a wholly different system, and it's very psychologically oriented, and it has to do with guilt, and it has to do with personal responsibility, and it has to do with fealty or loyalty to the group and to the leadership specifically of the group, to Miscavige. And so if you look at David Miscavige as the Pope, as like God's authority, and you look at Scientology as everything, then for these people to leave that world is so difficult. And for them to even recognize that what is happening to them is a crime or is harmful, that they didn't bring that on themselves, is impossible, because they are trained psychologically to think that anything negative that happens to them, they've brought it on themselves.
How does the church deal with the theology that's revealed once someone has gone to the higher levels of Scientology and Hubbard's underlying theology is revealed? Because undoubtedly there are people, once they hear this, think that, this just sounds ridiculous, I can't buy it, even though they may feel they've been tremendously helped by the technology of Scientology.
It's interesting. A lot of people do have that reaction. And, some people have left because of that. And a lot of people, though, the church as an institution doesn't really have to deal with them. Individual Scientologists tend to deal with any questioning. It's hard to explain this. First of all, Scientologists cannot question. They do not question. They do not say, this doesn't seem right to me. They don't admit that. And they are surrounded by people at the time they get to this level that you're talking about. They've been in the church for a long enough time that they are very dedicated. They've spent a lot of money. They've invested a tremendous amount of time, and this is their community. Most of their friends, if not all of their friends, are Scientologists. They may work only with Scientologists. This is the only world they know. So everyone around them, though, is telling them, look how great you're doing. You're doing so great. We're all doing this together. So if you have a doubt about something that you've just read or learned, that then makes you question your entire community, and most people don't want to do that.
On this issue, though, of Hubbard's theology, if you've got a theology that isn't sort of out there to debate, like, say, miracles in the Bible, you have some people who believe literally in miracles, others see them as metaphorical. I mean, there's all kinds of theological debate within most religious movements, but it sounds like it's very difficult to do that in theology because it's accepted as literally revealed by Hubbard himself. So there is just no theological debate?
There's no debate at all, period.
Okay, on any aspect
on
of
any
the church,
aspect,
you're saying.
and that's a big problem.
There's no protocol for dealing with dissenters within the church?
They're expelled. Dissenters within the church are excommunicated, and they are ordered. Well, they are put through what they call ethics procedures to bring them back in line with the church, which involves a lot of interrogation and confession and self-examination, and it's a long, arduous process. And those who refuse to abide by that and who leave are excommunicated, and their families they're declared what they call suppressive, and their families are ordered to disconnect from them, to sever ties, and that means and not just their families, but anyone who's connected to them. And so they lose everything. And that's something that happens very frequently.
Janet Reitman, good to talk with you. We thank you so much for being with us today on Air Talk.
Thanks so much for having me.
Inside Scientology, the story of America's most secretive religion. Your comments about the Church of Scientology, welcome throughout the course of the day and the days to come on the Air Talk page at kpcc.org. Coming up next, The World, and then Pat Morrison at 1 o'clock. Have a great day.